The planet designated
This
Terra,
place is amazing,
previously
right?
classified as an
The spaghetti is out of this world.
Deathworld, has revealed the most significant discovery in galactic history. What follows is a comprehensive report on the species we now know as humans and the philosophical implications of their existence. This document serves as both scientific record and cautionary tale about the nature of strength, adaptation, and what it truly means to survive. The title of this report, "The Man Who Destroys His Weak Self Can Never Be Destroyed by Others," emerged from extensive observation of human behavior patterns. It represents not merely a philosophical statement, but a biological and cultural reality that has fundamentally altered our understanding of evolutionary possibility. Part 1. The Discovery. The first indication that our classification of Terra was catastrophically wrong came during routine deep space monitoring. Communications specialist Veltar was conducting standard electromagnetic spectrum analysis when she detected something that should have been impossible: complex, modulated radio transmissions emanating from the Deathworld surface. "Sir," Veltar's voice carried in tremor of disbelief as she addressed Survey Commander Kalmesh, "I'm detecting organized communication patterns from Terra, multiple frequency bands, sophisticated modulation. This isn't natural phenomenon." Commander Kalmesh approached the scanning station with the measured gait of someone who had seen too many junior officers mistake atmospheric interference for signs of civilization. "Run a full diagnostic on your equipment specialist. Terra has been classified as uninhabitable for over 3 centuries. Our best xenobiologists have confirmed that nothing more complex than extremophile bacteria could possibly survive on that radiation-soaked hellscape." The diagnostic came back clean. Then came the visual confirmation that shattered every assumption the Galactic Survey Corps had maintained about the limits of biological adaptation. Through the high-resolution orbital telescopes, they witnessed something that defied explanation: vast structures of metal and composite materials stretching across continents, geometric patterns too precise to be natural, and most impossibly of all, movement. Organized, purposeful movement that could only indicate complex lifeforms operating in coordinated groups. "Commander," Navigation Officer Rixnell called out from across the bridge, "I'm detecting multiple launch signatures from the planet's surface. Whatever's down there is achieving orbital velocity." What happened next would be debated in xenobiological circles for generations. The first human spacecraft that intercepted their survey vessel was primitive by galactic standards: crude chemical propulsion, basic metal alloys, rudimentary life support systems. Yet it functioned. More than functioned, it thrived in the very environment that should have killed its occupants instantly. The being that emerged from that spacecraft during first contact proceedings was unlike anything in the galactic database. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry, carbon-based, these characteristics were common enough. But the physiological readings were impossible. This creature was operating in an environment that measured 73% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, with trace gases that included compounds toxic to most known life forms. The atmospheric pressure was crushing by civilized standards. The radiation levels from the local star should have sterilized any complex organic matter within hours. Yet the human, for that was what they called themselves, stood before the first contact team with no visible protective equipment, breathing the toxic atmosphere as if it were life-giving nectar. Dr. Bengai Nithal, the expedition's chief xenobiologist, later recorded in her personal notes, "Today I witnessed something that challenges every fundamental assumption about the nature of life in the universe. The human specimen displays adaptation patterns that suggest not just survival in extreme conditions, but optimization for them. Its bone density is approximately 400% greater than any civilized species. Its muscular efficiency operates at levels we've only observed in deep space mining equipment, and its neural pathways show redundancies that border on the absurd. This is not simply a life form that has survived a harsh environment. This is a life form that has been forged by that environment into something unprecedented." The human's name was Marcus, and his first words to the galactic delegation would become legendary: "Welcome to Earth. We've been wondering when someone would finally visit." The casual confidence in that statement, the absence of fear, the implicit assumption that they belonged in their environment rather than merely enduring it, represented the first glimpse into a philosophy that would revolutionize galactic understanding of strength and adaptation. Marcus led the delegation on a tour of what they called New York City, a sprawling metropolis that housed over 8 million humans and structures that reached toward the toxic sky like monuments to impossibility. The delegation moved through the streets in full environmental suits, their instruments constantly warning of lethal atmospheric conditions, while humans moved freely around them, engaged in complex social and commercial interactions that demonstrated a civilization of staggering sophistication. "Your protective equipment," Marcus observed, watching Dr. Nithal adjust her breathing apparatus. "It must be exhausting to carry all that technology just to survive here." Dr. Nithal's response was carefully measured. "Your world registers as lethally hostile on every metric we use to evaluate habitability. The radiation levels alone should prevent complex neurological function. How do you not only survive but thrive in these conditions?" Marcus paused in his walking, and something in his expression shifted, not to confusion, but to a deeper kind of understanding. "You're asking the wrong question, Doctor. You're asking how we survive this environment. The real question is, how could we survive anywhere else?" That statement marked the beginning of the most comprehensive xenobiological study ever undertaken. Over the following months, the survey team documented human capabilities that redefined the possible. Humans routinely operated in temperature ranges that would kill most civilized species. They consumed organic compounds that registered as toxic on standard analyzers. Their bodies contained redundant systems for nearly every vital function, as if evolution had designed them for environments where failure meant death and adaptation meant the difference between extinction and dominance. But it was the psychological observations that proved most disturbing. Humans didn't merely endure their harsh environment. They sought out even harsher conditions for recreation. They voluntarily subjected themselves to extreme temperatures, crushing pressures, and life-threatening scenarios as forms of entertainment. They called it adventure sports. Commander Kalmesh observed a human activity called mountaineering, where individuals climbed vertical rock faces thousands of meters high, often without mechanical assistance, in atmospheric conditions thin enough to cause hypoxia in most species. When asked why they engaged in such obviously dangerous behavior, the human climber responded with something approaching religious fervor. "Because it's there, and because it makes me stronger." The philosophical implications of this behavior pattern would not become clear until later observations revealed the deeper truth about human nature. The survey team's linguist, Velshan Korth, made the first breakthrough in understanding human psychology during a conversation with a human military officer named Sarah Chen. Chen was explaining human conflict resolution methods, a topic of intense interest to galactic observers since most civilized species had evolved past violent competition millennia ago. "You have to understand," Chen said, "conflict isn't something we try to avoid entirely. Controlled conflict makes us better. We train against resistance, because resistance creates strength. A muscle that's never challenged remains weak. A mind that's never tested remains limited. A spirit that's never pushed remains fragile." Velshan pressed for clarification, but surely cooperation is more efficient than competition. Shared resources, collaborative problem-solving, unified effort toward common goals, these are the hallmarks of advanced civilization. Chen smiled, an expression that the team had learned could indicate anything from friendly agreement to predatory warning. Cooperation is essential, but cooperation without the capability for independent action is dependency. Competition without the foundation of cooperation is chaos. We've learned to balance both, because our environment demanded it. This conversation led to the discovery of what humans called controlled adversity, the deliberate introduction of challenges and obstacles to stimulate growth and adaptation. Human education systems deliberately subjected young humans to progressively increasing challenges. Human athletics involved competitions designed to push participants to their physical and mental limits. Human professional development required individuals to continuously master new skills and overcome new obstacles. Most remarkably, humans applied this principle to their internal development as well. They possessed what they called self-discipline, the ability to impose restrictions and challenges on themselves, even when external circumstances were comfortable. They exercised even when not fleeing predators. They studied even when not facing immediate problems. They practiced skills even when those skills weren't immediately necessary. The xenopsychology team's final report on this behavior contained a phrase that would become central to galactic understanding of human nature. Humans appear to instinctively understand that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. This wasn't merely philosophical posturing. Biological analysis revealed that humans had developed neurological pathways that actually rewarded the overcoming of resistance and the endurance of controlled hardship. Their brains produced chemicals that created positive emotional states in response to challenges successfully met and obstacles successfully overcome. They had evolved not just to survive adversity, but to be emotionally and neurologically reinforced by it. The implications were staggering. Every other known intelligent species had evolved to minimize exposure to hardship and maximize comfort and safety. They had developed technology and social systems designed to eliminate challenges and reduce resistance. Humans had evolved to seek out and create challenges because challenge itself was a form of nourishment for their continued development. Part 1. Nithal's team discovered that human DNA contained what they termed adaptive redundancy patterns, genetic sequences that appeared to activate only under stress conditions, providing enhanced capability precisely when challenges became severe. Human immune systems grew stronger when exposed to pathogens. Human bones became denser when subjected to mechanical stress. Human neural pathways became more efficient when forced to process complex or contradictory information. But perhaps most remarkably, human social structures reflected this same principle. Human communities were organized around what they called mutual challenge and support, systems where individuals were simultaneously pushed to exceed their current capabilities and provided with the resources necessary to meet those challenges. A human institution called school exemplified this approach. Young humans were systematically exposed to information and problems that exceeded their current processing capacity, but provided with guidance and resources to develop the capabilities necessary to handle that information. The process was repeated continuously, with challenges increasing as capabilities grew. Human athletic competitions demonstrated the same principle on a physical level. Individuals and teams competed against opposition designed to push them to their limits, with the explicit understanding that losing was valuable if it revealed areas for improvement, and winning was valuable only if it resulted from genuine capability development. Human professional environments operated on similar principles. Individuals were expected to continuously expand their skill sets and take on responsibilities that pushed them beyond their comfort zones. Organizations that failed to challenge their members were considered stagnant and inevitably fell behind those that maintained cultures of controlled adversity. The survey team's anthropologist, Zexval Mundar, summarized these observations in a report that would become required reading at the Galactic Academy. Human civilization appears to be built on a fundamental recognition that strength is not a static quality, but a dynamic process. They have institutionalized the principle that current capability is only meaningful as a foundation for developing greater capability. Their phrase, continuous improvement, is not merely a business concept, but a philosophical foundation that permeates their entire approach to existence. This understanding led to the next phase of observation, studying how humans applied these principles to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. The team had arrived during what humans called a global crisis, a pandemic that was affecting human populations worldwide. Rather than witnessing the collapse that such challenges had caused in other civilizations, the observers documented something unprecedented: a coordinated global response that treated the crisis as an opportunity for accelerated development. Human medical researchers compressed decades of typical development into months, creating new treatments and preventive measures at rates that seemed to violate the normal laws of scientific progress. Human social systems adapted and evolved in real time, developing new forms of cooperation and resource distribution that proved more efficient than their pre-crisis systems. Human educational institutions transformed their entire approach to knowledge transfer, discovering methods that proved superior to their traditional approaches. Most remarkably, individual humans used the crisis as an opportunity for personal development. They learned new skills, developed new capabilities, and emerged from the challenge demonstrably stronger than they had been before it began. The crisis didn't break human civilization. It served as a catalyst that accelerated their development across every dimension. Commander Qualmesh's final report on this phase of observation contained the statement that would define galactic policy toward humanity for generations to come. We are not dealing with a species that simply survived in a hostile environment. We are dealing with a species that has evolved to transform hostility into strength, challenge into capability, and adversity into advantage. They do not merely adapt to their environment, they adapt their environment to serve as a continuous source of the challenges they require for continued development. Part 2. The Philosophy of Strength Through Adversity. The second phase of study focused on understanding the philosophical foundations that enabled human behavior patterns. What the research team discovered was a comprehensive worldview built around the principle that strength is not something one possesses, but something continuously creates through the process of overcoming resistance. Dr. Kimolak Servel, the expedition's philosopher-scientist, was assigned to decode human philosophical systems. What she found challenged every assumption about the nature of wisdom and strength that had guided galactic civilization for millennia. Human philosophy, Dr. Surveil reported, does not seek to eliminate suffering but to transform it into a vehicle for development. They have developed multiple systems of thought that explicitly recognize struggle as necessary for growth, and have created practices designed to intentionally introduce controlled forms of hardship into their lives. The first breakthrough came through studying human religious and spiritual practices. Unlike the contemplative, comfort-seeking traditions common to most galactic civilizations, human spiritual development was built around disciplines that required individuals to push beyond their immediate desires and impulses. A human practice called meditation initially appeared similar to galactic contemplative traditions, but deeper observation revealed fundamental differences. While galactic meditation sought peaceful states free from disturbance, human meditation practices often involve maintaining focus and awareness precisely in the presence of discomfort, distraction, and internal resistance. They viewed the ability to remain centered while experiencing difficulty as a more valuable skill than the ability to achieve tranquility in ideal conditions. Human physical disciplines reflected the same principle. They had developed systems called martial arts that combined physical training with philosophical development, based on the understanding that mastering one's response to physical challenge created mental and spiritual capabilities that could be applied to any form of adversity. Dr. Surveil observed a martial arts class where students were learning to respond to simulated attacks. Rather than simply teaching defensive techniques, the instruction emphasized developing what they called composure under pressure, the ability to think clearly, move efficiently, and make good decisions precisely when experiencing fear, pain, or confusion. The goal is not to eliminate fear, the human instructor explained, but to act correctly despite fear. The goal is not to avoid pain, but to function effectively while experiencing pain. The goal is not to prevent confusion, but to maintain clarity even when circumstances are unclear. This philosophy extended to human approaches to education and child-rearing. Rather than protecting young humans from all difficulties, human parents deliberately expose their children to age-appropriate challenges designed to develop resilience, problem-solving capabilities, and emotional regulation skills. A human parent named David Kim explained the principle. If I solve all my child's problems for her, I make her dependent on me for solutions. If I prevent her from ever experiencing failure, I leave her without the skills necessary to recover from failure. If I shield her from all discomfort, I leave her fragile when discomfort is unavoidable. My job is not to make her life easy. My job is to make her strong enough to handle whatever life brings. This approach produced humans who entered adulthood with what the research team termed anti-fragile psychology, mental and emotional systems that became stronger rather than weaker when exposed to stress and challenge. The team's discoveries about human economic systems revealed the same principle operating at a societal level. Human economic theory explicitly recognized that competition and challenge drive innovation and efficiency. Rather than seeking to eliminate economic pressure, human systems were designed to maintain controlled levels of competitive stress that would stimulate continuous improvement and development. Human businesses competed against each other in what they called free markets, with the understanding that companies that failed to continuously improve would be replaced by more capable competitors. Rather than viewing this as cruel, humans understood it as a mechanism that ensured societal resources were directed toward the most effective solutions and approaches. Individual humans approached their careers with the same philosophy. They actively sought positions and responsibilities that pushed them beyond their current capabilities, understanding that professional growth required taking on challenges that were initially beyond their comfort zones. A human engineer named Lisa Rodriguez explained her approach to career development. Every time I take on a project that I'm not sure I can handle, I learn something new. Every time I stay in my comfort zone, I stagnate. The discomfort of being challenged is temporary. The capabilities I develop by meeting those challenges last forever. This philosophy even extended to human recreational activities. They had developed forms of entertainment that involved controlled risk, physical challenge, and mental pressure. They called these adventure sports, and they served as voluntary training grounds for developing the capabilities needed to handle involuntary challenges. Rock climbing, skydiving, marathon running, competitive athletics, all of these activities involved deliberately subjecting oneself to conditions that required peak performance under pressure. Humans engaged in these activities not because they were necessary for survival, but because they developed qualities of character and capability that proved valuable in all areas of life. The research team's anthropologist documented a conversation with a human mountain climber named James Wright that crystallized the human approach to voluntary challenge. "Why do you climb mountains?" the anthropologist asked. "Because they're there," Wright replied. A response that initially seemed meaningless but revealed deeper significance upon analysis. "But there are many things that exist that you don't engage with," the anthropologist pressed. "What specifically about mountains compels you to climb them?" Wright paused to consider the question seriously. "Mountains represent challenges that can't be negotiated with, manipulated, or avoided. Either you develop the strength, skill, and mental fortitude necessary to meet the challenge, or you fail. There's no ambiguity, no politics, no shortcuts. The mountain doesn't care about your excuses or your intentions. It only responds to your capabilities. When you successfully climb a mountain, you know with absolute certainty that you've developed capabilities you didn't have before." This conversation led to a breakthrough in understanding human psychology. Humans actively sought out what they called objective challenges, situations where success or failure depended entirely on their actual capabilities rather than external factors like luck, politics, or circumstance. They viewed such challenges as the most reliable method for developing and testing genuine strength. Human educational systems reflected this understanding. Rather than simply transmitting information, human education was designed around presenting students with problems that required them to develop new thinking capabilities. They called this approach learning by doing, and it produced humans who were not merely knowledgeable but genuinely capable of applying their knowledge to novel situations. The team observed a human university where students were required to complete what they called a thesis project, an independent investigation of a problem that had no predetermined solution. Students were expected to identify the problem, develop methodologies for addressing it, and produce original solutions that demonstrated genuine understanding and capability. Dr. Kelsier Teen Philippa Surveil noted in her observations, "Human education explicitly recognizes that knowledge without the capability to apply that knowledge under challenging conditions is essentially useless. Their educational systems are designed not to make learning easy, but to ensure that learning results in genuine capability development." This principle extended to human approaches to personal relationships and social development. Rather than seeking relationships that were consistently comfortable and easy, humans actively engaged with people who challenged them to grow and develop. Human friendships often involved what they called constructive criticism, honest feedback about areas for improvement, delivered with the intention of helping the other person develop greater capabilities. Rather than viewing such feedback as hurtful, humans understood it as a form of respect and care. Human romantic partnerships demonstrated the same principle. Rather than seeking partners who would never create conflict or difficulty, humans valued partners who would challenge them to become better versions of themselves. They understood that relationships without challenge led to stagnation, while relationships that included constructive conflict could stimulate continued growth and development. A human marriage counselor named Dr. Patricia Hernandez explained the principle. "Couples who never disagree aren't necessarily happy. They may simply be avoiding the difficult conversations that are necessary for growth. Healthy relationships include conflict because healthy people continue to change and develop, and change inevitably creates some level of tension that must be worked through." The research team's final breakthrough in understanding human philosophy came through studying their approach to failure and defeat. Unlike most galactic civilizations, which viewed failure as something to be avoided at all costs, humans had developed sophisticated frameworks for extracting value from unsuccessful attempts. They had developed practices called after-action reviews and post-mortems, systematic analyses of what went wrong in failed attempts designed to extract lessons that would improve future performance. Rather than viewing failure as a source of shame, humans understood it as a source of information about areas that needed development. Human athletes provided the clearest examples of this approach. Rather than being devastated by losses, successful human athletes used defeats as diagnostic tools for identifying specific areas for improvement. They studied their failures more intensively than their successes, understanding that failures revealed limitations that successes often obscured. A human tennis player named Michael Chang explained his approach to losing matches. "Every loss teaches me something I couldn't learn from winning. When I win, I know I was good enough. When I lose, I learn exactly where I need to get better. The losses are more valuable than the wins because they show me my next area for development." This philosophy produced humans who were not merely resilient in the face of setbacks, but genuinely strengthened by them. Each failure became a source of information and motivation for improvement, rather than a reason for discouragement or abandonment of effort. Dr. Servel's final report on human philosophy contained the observation that would revolutionize galactic approaches to personal development. Humans have solved the fundamental paradox that has limited most civilized species. They have learned to simultaneously accept their current limitations while refusing to be constrained by them. They acknowledge weakness not as a permanent condition, but as a temporary state that can be transformed through appropriate challenge and effort. Their philosophy produces individuals who are simultaneously humble about their current capabilities and confident about their potential for development. The implications of this discovery extended far beyond individual psychology. Human societies were organized around the principle that collective strength emerged from individual strength, and individual strength emerged from the willingness to face and overcome personal limitations. Rather than seeking to eliminate individual challenges, human societies were designed to ensure that individuals had access to the challenges necessary for continued growth. Their economic systems rewarded innovation and improvement. Their political systems included mechanisms for peaceful conflict resolution that allowed different viewpoints to compete and evolve. Their cultural systems celebrated both individual achievement and collaborative effort, understanding that strong individuals could create strong communities, and strong communities could support individuals in facing even greater challenges. The research team's philosopher concluded her analysis with a statement that would define galactic policy toward humanity. We are observing a species that has discovered how to transform every obstacle into an opportunity, every challenge into a motivation for transcendence. They have built their entire civilization around the principle that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, and they have created systems that enable every individual to engage in that process of continuous self-transformation. Part 3. The implications of indestructible strength. The final phase of research focused on understanding the practical implications of human philosophy and capabilities. What the team discovered was a species that had not merely adapted to survive in a hostile environment, but had used that environment to develop capabilities that made them effectively immune to the kinds of challenges that typically destroyed civilizations. Dr. Hexmal Vorth, the expedition's strategic analyst, was tasked with evaluating human civilization's stability and potential for long-term survival. Her findings challenged every assumption about the factors that determine civilizational success or failure. Standard models for civilizational analysis, Dr. Vorth reported, assume that stability comes from the elimination of internal and external pressures. Human civilization appears to derive its stability precisely from its ability to transform pressure into strength. They have created a self-reinforcing system where challenges serve as fuel for continued development rather than threats to existing structures. The first major discovery came through analyzing human responses to what they called existential threats, challenges that posed potential risks to the survival of their species or civilization. Rather than being paralyzed by such threats, humans responded with accelerated development and innovation that typically left them stronger after facing the threat than they had been before it emerged. The team arrived during a period when humans were dealing with multiple simultaneous challenges: climate change affecting their planetary environment, resource scarcity in certain regions, and social tensions arising from rapid technological development. Any one of these challenges had historically been sufficient to destroy other civilizations. Humans were facing all of them simultaneously while continuing to develop and expand their capabilities. Human responses to climate change demonstrated their fundamental approach to civilizational challenges. Rather than simply trying to prevent environmental changes, they were simultaneously developing technologies to mitigate those changes and adapting their social and economic systems to thrive under new conditions. They were treating the environmental challenge as an opportunity to develop capabilities they had never needed before. Human engineers were developing new energy systems that were more efficient and sustainable than their previous technologies. Human agricultural scientists were creating food production methods that were more productive and less environmentally impactful. Human social planners were redesigning cities and communities to be more resilient and adaptable to changing conditions. Most remarkably, they were doing all of this while maintaining and even improving their standard of living. The challenge was serving as a catalyst for innovations that made human civilization more capable than it had been before the challenge emerged. Dr. Vorth documented similar patterns in human responses to resource scarcity. Rather than simply competing for existing resources, humans consistently responded to scarcity by developing new technologies and methods that made previously inaccessible resources available or that reduced the need for scarce resources entirely. When certain metals became scarce, human scientists developed alternative materials that proved superior to the original ones. When energy resources became limited, human engineers developed more efficient energy systems and alternative energy sources. When agricultural land became scarce, human farmers developed vertical farming techniques that produced more food per unit of space than traditional methods. The pattern was consistent. Humans responded to limitations by transcending them through innovation and development, rather than by accepting them as permanent constraints. Human social systems demonstrated the same capability for adaptive strengthening. When social tensions arose from technological or economic changes, human societies developed new institutions and practices that transformed the tensions into sources of creative development rather than destructive conflict. The research team observed human democratic institutions managing disagreements about policy directions through processes that allowed different viewpoints to compete peacefully and evolve through debate and testing. Rather than seeking to eliminate disagreement, human political systems were designed to harness disagreement as a source of innovation and improvement. Human legal systems demonstrated similar adaptive capabilities. When new technologies or social conditions created situations that existing laws couldn't address effectively, human legal institutions evolved to develop new frameworks that maintained social stability while accommodating continued development and change. Dr. Worth's analysis of human economic systems revealed perhaps the most remarkable example of adaptive strengthening. Human economic systems were designed around what they called creative destruction, the process by which inefficient or obsolete systems were continuously replaced by more effective alternatives. Rather than protecting existing businesses and industries from competition and change, human economic systems encouraged competition and innovation. Understanding that this process, while sometimes difficult for individuals in the short term, consistently produced better outcomes for society in the long term. Human businesses that failed to adapt to changing conditions were replaced by businesses that were better suited to new circumstances. Human workers whose skills became obsolete were supported in developing new skills that were more valuable in changed conditions. Human technologies that became outdated were replaced by technologies that were more capable and efficient. The result was an economic system that became stronger and more capable over time, rather than gradually declining through the accumulation of inefficiencies and obsolete structures. The team's economist, Rixnal Korvad, summarized his observations. Human economic systems operate on the principle that continuous improvement requires continuous challenge. They have institutionalized processes that ensure their economic structures face regular pressure to improve or be replaced. This creates short-term instability but long-term strength and adaptability that we have never observed in any other civilization. Human military and defense systems provided another example of the principle that strength comes from the ability to transform challenge into capability. Rather than seeking to eliminate all potential threats, human military doctrine focused on developing capabilities that could adapt to and overcome any threats that might emerge. Human military training was built around exposure to simulated challenges that were often more difficult than actual combat conditions. Military personnel were trained to operate effectively under extreme stress, with limited resources, in unfamiliar environments, and while dealing with equipment failures and unexpected complications. The result was military forces that were not merely prepared for known threats, but capable of adapting to and overcoming threats that had never been anticipated. Human military history was filled with examples of forces that had succeeded despite facing superior numbers, better equipment, or more favorable conditions, simply because their training had prepared them to find ways to overcome any form of disadvantage. A human military officer named Colonel Sarah Martinez explained the philosophy. "We don't train our soldiers to win easy battles. We train them to win impossible battles. When you're prepared for the impossible, everything else becomes manageable." This approach to challenge and development had produced what Dr. Worth termed civilizational anti-fragility, a society that became stronger rather than weaker when exposed to stress and challenge. Human educational institutions were continuously evolving to meet changing needs and to incorporate new knowledge and capabilities. Human scientific institutions were designed around processes of continuous questioning and testing that ensured scientific understanding continued to develop and improve. Human cultural institutions maintained traditions while simultaneously adapting to new conditions and incorporating new insights. The result was a civilization that maintained continuity and stability while simultaneously engaging in continuous development and improvement. They had solved the apparent contradiction between stability and change by creating stability through adaptive capability rather than through resistance to change. Dr. T.S.C.Y. Worth's strategic analysis concluded with a prediction that would prove remarkably prescient. Human civilization has developed capabilities that make it essentially immune to the forms of challenge that typically destroy civilizations. They have created systems that transform external threats into internal strength, that convert obstacles into opportunities, and that use challenges as fuel for continued development. Unless they face challenges that exceed their rate of adaptive development, they appear to be on a trajectory toward capabilities that we can barely comprehend. The final phase of research focused on individual human psychology and its role in creating civilizational strength. Dr. Pixran Thelvar, the expedition psychologist, studied how individual human mental and emotional systems contributed to their species' remarkable adaptive capabilities. Human psychology, Dr. Thelvar reported, is organized around what they call growth mindset, the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and challenge rather than being fixed traits. This belief system creates individuals who actively seek out challenges as opportunities for development rather than avoiding them as sources of threat. Individual humans consistently demonstrated the ability to transform personal limitations into personal strengths through what they called self-improvement or personal development. Rather than accepting their current capabilities as permanent, humans actively worked to identify areas for improvement and engaged in practices designed to develop greater capabilities in those areas. Human athletes provided clear examples of this process. They systematically identified physical and mental limitations, then developed training programs designed to overcome those limitations. The process was continuous. As they overcame current limitations, they identified new areas for development and created new challenges for themselves. Human professionals demonstrated the same approach in their careers. They actively sought positions and responsibilities that required capabilities they didn't yet possess, understanding that the process of developing those capabilities would make them more valuable and effective. Human students approached education with the same mindset. Rather than avoiding difficult subjects or challenging material, successful human students actively engaged with the most challenging content available to them, understanding that the difficulty of the challenge was directly related to the value of the capabilities they would develop by meeting it. Dr. Thelvar documented conversations with individual humans that revealed the psychological foundations of their approach to challenge and development. A human entrepreneur named Jennifer Kim explained her approach to business challenges. Every problem my company faces is an opportunity to develop capabilities we didn't have before. If we solve the easy problems, we remain a company that can only handle easy problems. If we solve the difficult problems, we become a company that can handle anything. A human artist named David Chen described his approach to creative development. I deliberately seek out artistic challenges that I'm not sure I can meet. If I only work on projects that I know I can complete successfully, I never grow as an artist. The projects that push me beyond my current abilities are the ones that teach me what I'm actually capable of. A human parent named Maria Rodriguez explained her approach to raising children. My job is not to protect my children from all difficulties, but to help them develop the strength and skills necessary to handle whatever difficulties they encounter. If I solve all their problems for them, I leave them helpless when they face problems I can't solve. These individual approaches to challenge and development created what Dr. Thelvar termed psychological anti-fragility. Mental and emotional systems that became stronger rather than weaker when exposed to appropriate levels of stress and challenge. Human individuals who had faced and overcome significant challenges typically demonstrated greater resilience, problem-solving capability, and emotional regulation than those who had lived more comfortable lives. Rather than being damaged by difficulty, humans who had successfully navigated challenging experiences emerged with enhanced capabilities for handling future challenges. This pattern held true across all areas of human experience. Students who had struggled with difficult academic material typically developed better learning strategies and greater persistence than those who had found academics easy. Athletes who had experienced defeats and setbacks typically developed greater mental toughness and strategic thinking than those who had experienced only success. Professionals who had faced and overcome career challenges typically developed greater adaptability and leadership capabilities than those whose careers had proceeded smoothly. The research team's final discovery concerned the relationship between individual and collective human strength. Human societies were organized around the principle that strong individuals created strong communities, and strong communities provided the support necessary for individuals to face even greater challenges. Human families provided children with both challenge and support, understanding that children needed to develop independence and capability while also having access to resources and guidance when facing difficulties beyond their current abilities. Human educational institutions provided students with challenging material and high expectations, while also providing the instruction and support necessary to meet those challenges successfully. Human workplaces expected high performance and continuous improvement while also providing training, mentorship, and resources necessary for employees to develop the capabilities required for superior performance. Human communities maintained social safety nets that provided support for individuals facing temporary difficulties while also maintaining expectations that individuals would work to overcome those difficulties and contribute to community strength. The result was a civilization composed of individuals who were simultaneously independent and interdependent, capable of standing alone when necessary while also capable of contributing to and drawing from collective strength when appropriate. Dr. Thelvar's final psychological assessment contained the observation that would define galactic understanding of human potential. Humans have developed both individual and collective systems that operate on the principle that true strength comes not from avoiding weakness, but from continuously transforming weakness into strength. They have created a self-reinforcing cycle where individual development contributes to collective capability, and collective capability supports individuals in facing challenges that promote further development. The result is a species that becomes stronger in direct proportion to the magnitude of the challenges it faces. The research expedition's final comprehensive report concluded with a series of recommendations that would fundamentally alter galactic policy toward humanity. Terra should be reclassified from a Class X Deathworld to a Class A Development World, a planet that produces species with capabilities far exceeding galactic norms. Humans should be approached not as a primitive species requiring guidance, but as a potentially superior species from which other civilizations could learn principles of adaptive development and anti-fragile growth. The human principle that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others represents a fundamental truth about the nature of strength and development that has implications for every aspect of galactic civilization. Human approaches to education, economics, politics, military development, and personal growth offer models that could revolutionize galactic approaches to these challenges. Most importantly, human civilization demonstrates that it is possible to create systems that become stronger rather than weaker over time, that transform challenges into capabilities, and that use adversity as fuel for continued development. These capabilities suggest that humans may represent the next stage in the evolution of intelligent life, a species that has learned to direct its own development through the intelligent application of challenge and effort. We recommend immediate establishment of cultural and educational exchange programs with humanity, not to civilize them according to galactic norms, but to learn from them how to develop the capabilities necessary for our own civilizations to achieve the kind of anti-fragile strength that they have demonstrated. The discovery of humanity marked the beginning of a new era in galactic development, an era defined by the recognition that true strength comes not from the elimination of challenge, but from the transformation of challenge into capability. The Deathworld had produced not just survivors, but teachers who would revolutionize galactic understanding of what it meant to be truly strong. In the final analysis, the humans had proven something that the galaxy had never before witnessed, that a species could evolve beyond mere adaptation to their environment, to become masters of adaptation itself, capable of transforming any environment into a source of continued strength and development. They had not merely survived their death world, they had used it to become something unprecedented in galactic history. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, because such a man has learned to transform every external challenge into an opportunity for internal development. Humanity had proven this principle at every level, individual, social, and civilizational, and in doing so, they had redefined what was possible for intelligent life in the universe. End of report classification. Historical document. Required reading for all Galactic Survey Corps personnel distribution. Unrestricted. Public archive. Date of declassification. GSC 2008-50.7.